REDCap is a software that prevents some of the kinds of problems that can trip up researchers like myself when we're working with an Excel spreadsheet, that can provide risks for researchers who do survey work. And it also provides an ability to track any changes made to a data file. All of us are beginning to face essentially a new world with respect to expectations about data sharing, data reliability, and big data. I believe eventually it will be most of our extramural funders are beginning to ask us, share your data with your colleagues, deposit your data in large-scale data repositories, make sure that your data meets certain quality standards. And so these are expectations that we're going to have as a researcher, and what we need to do as a university. And I think what Tech is doing with REDCap is providing one of the tools that will help us do some of these things. In August of this year, NIH announced a new policy in which they said that the institution that is submitting data, and that would include Texas Tech, following, if you're collecting genomic data as part of a grant application, there's going to be an expectation that your data be deposited with NIH. The expectation for Texas Tech is that we need to certify that the data were collected in a legal and ethically appropriate manner, and that personal identifiers have been removed. And we as investigators need to provide basic plans for following this policy as part of our data proposals. We have a number of researchers at Tech now who want to monitor genomic data as part of other types of data collection, perhaps work in the behavioral sciences, sometimes work in some of the other social sciences or biomedical sciences. But NIH and our other funders are going to be asking for data in particular kinds of formats. This is their recently released instructions for a national database for clinical trials related to mental illness. This is part of the RDoC program, or it's associated with the new RDoC program at NIMH. NIH is now setting up data systems so that if you're working on a clinical trial or doing work that meets the clinical trial definitions in areas of mental health, you have a grant award, and this could be a fellowship award for those of you who are in training, and you need to organize your data in certain ways for sharing. Each of these topics down below are topics that the NDCT, the National Database for Clinical Trials, says if you're going to be preparing data for sharing, you need to be trained in all these areas. And when you look at these topic areas, many of them are discussions of how you've organized your data set for it to be shared with other investigators. How have you identified your variables? How good are your metadata? How sure are you that you have not missorted data elements? How sure are you that any change made to that data set has been recorded in the software?
REDCap is a comprehensive data integrity, management, and analysis tool. REDCap is a consortium of institutes of higher education. They're all represented here on the map. So it's a secure application for building surveys, databases, and it is a consortium and a user group, a large group of institutions and individuals. Currently, it is being used for a large mass of data projects. It is a full regimen that addresses data integrity, entry, management, auditing, tracking. The Department of Education nationally requires this level of auditing, but we have to be able to provide this documentation and provide these records. And in fact, failure to do so, a researcher can be deemed incompetent. If the researcher is deemed incompetent, meaning you didn't take what a reasonable individual would take precautions that they would have taken in a situation, then who's liable?
Is the institution itself that person represents responsible?
No, not if my conduct is found to be irresponsible or not reasonable in terms of my precaution. So if the institution liability insurance isn't going to cover me, then who's liable?
You are.
That's right. These lawsuits get very intense with regard to punitive damages, damage to the science community. Consider REDCap. By using this and the system and the method, it gives you a rock-solid case that you exercised reasonable competency with that data. And you will have all the documentation that you would need to prove that a file was altered or not altered, how it was kept, who had access to it. That is the first case for REDCap. The second case that we haven't even touched yet is data security problems. Data analysis problems have been around since academia has been around. So whether it was a stone tablet and chisel or an SPSS program running on a laptop, the notion of academic integrity, research integrity, is as old as academia. What is not old is data security issues. So if it's not bad enough that we have to worry about making sure we have ethical conduct, responsible conduct of research, now we also have to worry about looking at the ethical protection of data. But when I say data security, I mean secure practices when you're doing those four things: sharing, storing, transferring, and auditing. And what do I mean by secure? I have logic, documentation, and reasoning as to who has access, what kind of access they have, when they exercise that right of access, and when will that access terminate. We need to worry about the security of data at rest, so when it's stored on hard drives and servers, in transit, so when we're sending it, whether that be a web page, because you're collecting data, a survey, SurveyMonkey, and you're collecting data, and the data gets intercepted on its way to your system, that's in transit. Then the third aspect is data display. Just as important as what is the form of that data in terms of where it is stored, equally important is who has access to it, and that includes the ability for people to see over your shoulder. Or if you're looking at it on a mobile device. On a mobile device. Or if you're in a public Wi-Fi area. When we display, we have to make sure that we're displaying only to the individual to whom access was granted based on our logical matrix of reasons. REDCap provides all of those protections built into the interface. Data at rest is encrypted, and we can talk more about that if you have questions. When it's transferred, it's encrypted. Data at display has timeout, so if it's going too long, you've in the internet cafe on the public Wi-Fi, colleague comes in, you've got your screen up with confidential student data, you get sidetracked over there to the pumpkin spice latte, next thing you know, REDCap locks down. If there's not activity, it closes down. Last 10 years, what we know about education is we are a target for data breaches. Hackers put up a virulent website, you click on it, they take your credentials, they throw out those emails to anybody. Enough people click that it makes it profitable for them. So that's sort of the uninteresting. That's the plain Jane. What I have been doing more and more of with regard to my own research, helping administrators and researchers on this campus and others, is dealing with the far more threatening paradigm, and that is the targeted attacks. Hacker groups all over the country are organized, they're methodical, highly skilled, and they're patient. universities are a target for these groups.
We have studies essentially of individuals where we collect data over time, either multiple times per day or daily data, and look at relationships, say, between distress and kinds of thoughts or situational triggers that might activate depression or anxiety.
Okay, so I didn't know what a specific research project was, but I knew what his expertise was. I knew this would be a good example. All right, I'm a foreign pharmaceutical company. Why might I want access to Dr. Luma's data on depression, anxiety, individual level data? Drugs make money. Patient information.
Blackmail.
Blackmail. Oh, it gets better. What if I'm a terrorist? Why might I want Dr. Luma's data? Tamper with medications? What about if I got access to those individuals? What's that? Good, and why might that be a big profit for me? Find out who to target. You're right. Find out who to target. The kind of research that he is doing is not only very informative to science, but it's lucrative to the international pharmaceutical area, to terrorists. What might another terrorist interest in that data be? How do you identify possible partners in crime? I may not know mental instability. I may not know a thing about anybody on that list. I bet on that list I can find me somebody who's just unstable enough that I can convince them to partner with me. Having done a little bit of interaction with some colleagues around the country, I can promise you these are not fantasy stories, these are things that are happening. All from depression and anxiety data, targeting how do we improve treatments, medications, and clinical regimens with these individuals can be used essentially to terrorize a country. What REDCap allows us to do is to provide an environment that allows us to the best of our ability, and there will never be 100% solution, to empower people with knowledge, to provide state-of-the-art tools aimed at data security, data monitoring, data auditing, for your protection, the institution's protection, and the country's protection. The idea is to provide an environment where at least we don't have holes springing out. We're a huge target area because of that research data. Secondly, we're all here on one open campus. So in corporate America or corporate Europe, if you're hired and working as a researcher, your internet activity is monitored, logged, and reviewed methodically. Your emails are scanned and reviewed before they're allowed to cross the internet. They put all kinds of filters on your internet access. Why? Because they can't afford for you to get enthralled with some get-rich-quick email and click on a virulent website. So what is their solution? Time is money. We're simply going to cut it off. You have no access. Well, we can't do that in academia. We don't want to do that in academia.